كل ما يرى وما لا يرى وبرب
So if you guys aren't familiar with who Jim Bob is, he mainly deals with atheists. I think he's done some other stuff too, and he normally does like a lot of reviews and stuff like that, but he comments on a lot of this stuff. But I thought he had like a really good video this morning on evolution, which I thought again was just like fantastic. So let's take a look at least the beginning of it, and I'll kind of like give my thoughts.
I wanted to talk to you about evolution.
Absolutely. Evolution is such a rich topic. What aspect are you thinking about? Like the basics, a specific mechanism like natural selection, or maybe some specific examples?
Okay, let's go with specific examples.
That sounds great. Do you have a particular group of organisms in mind? Like
No, I don't grant you organisms.
Ah, got it. No problem.
Let's talk about the brain.
Ooh, yeah. The evolution of the brain is really fascinating.
I'm sure you think it is. Yeah.
Now, real quick before we jump into it, this is really interesting to me because, I mean, typically, like when Christians debate atheists, they typically debate them on, at least as of lately, like a lot of us use tag, which I think is very effective. But this is like another use of it, which is like, it's pretty interesting. And I never thought about it that way. Kind of like just the way that he frames it. So just, check it out. What's going on, Peace? I didn't even see all you guys. What's going on? Arthur, Kefa, what's going on? What's going on, Peace? All right, so let's kind of jump back into it and kind of see where he takes this. It's pretty interesting. Again, if you guys want to join via X, go ahead and hit the link up top. Any Christians that want to ask questions, my homies, if you guys know who you are, Dylan, Peace, AJ, Justin, if you guys want to join the link on X and kind of just hang out, you can. Just let me know.
Enough with that. So isn't it true that all of our appendages, including our brain or our eyes or our lungs or our hearts, are the result of random processes and it's just incidental that they do what they do?
Yeah, that's a really common misconception, but it's not quite random in the way we might think. The mutations...
Hold on a second. The mutation itself is produced by random processes, yes?
Exactly.
Okay, stop there. Stop right there. Okay, look, I'm asking you yes or no questions. I'd really appreciate if you just answer them if they are yes or no questions with yes or no.
Ah, gotcha. I'll keep it simple. So
okay, yeah, great. Why don't you try that again? Do you understand me?
Yes, absolutely.
Nope, you added absolutely. I just asked for a yes or no answer to a yes or no question. Do you?
Now, obviously, like he's being funny here, but notice how he's framing the question because evolution posits now, not to be overly simplistic. Obviously, they're not just going to come out and just be like, well, something came from that. Like, obviously, like they have a way in which that they explain it, where they believe like the first single-celled organism came about after, a long period of time. But like the ordering of the universe and all of these things, they will posit to some extent that it is by chance. And what they do to kind of like make it seem less insane is that they say, well, it took millions, billions of years or whatever in order for it to get to this, like each stage took X amount of time for it to move from this stage to the next stage to the next stage, and then we get single-celled organisms, and then that turns into this, and then that turns into that, and that turns, and then we introduce the whole idea of macroevolution. But the problem that Jim Bob is getting ready to point out is that kind of makes no sense, because when we're talking about the brain, if the brain is also a form of this random selection process of mutations and things like that, then okay, like the processes and the way in which we think is also going to be random. So even though you think that it's coherent, if everything is the process of some type of random mutation, then how do you know that what you're thinking right now is not also random? And obviously, like I'm oversimplifying what he's saying, so he's going to be able to explain a little bit better. Brian says, what church should I visit if there's only Protestant Catholic churches in my country? Only Protestant church I go to is a Lutheran one. What is your advice on this? Well, I mean, there's a lot of people that live in places like Turkey where Christianity is actually illegal. Well, not necessarily illegal, but it's frowned upon heavily. And what a lot of people do is they practice their religion in secrecy there, but they meet with priests online. I know it's not ideal, but until you can find somewhere where you can regularly attend, you can meet with priests online. You could ask them to help you and figure out, what you can do. And even if this is going to sound kind of crazy, but there are people that do this. Like I said, I was reading the story about the people in Turkey. They go to liturgy like once a year. They literally go on vacation and they'll come to like the US or something like that. And then they'll go to a parish there and partake in the Eucharist and then go home because it's just too dangerous for them to do it in their own country. And there's like no churches in their country, no Orthodox churches. The Muslims went and they bought Hagia Sophia. So, they can't even do that anymore. So it's one of those things where it's just like, okay, even if you just go once a year or even if you try to meet with a priest online, explain your situation and see how he can help you, that's going to be your best bet. But don't compromise for the truth if it be possible. Now, obviously, everybody's situation is different. I don't know the specifics of yours. I don't know where you live. I don't know your life situation. Your best bet is going to be to speak with a priest on this particular situation. So just pray for our brother here, guys. All right, guys, let's continue listening.
You understand me?
Yes, I understand you. I'll keep it.
I didn't. You are retarded.
If you have any other questions, or
shut up. The process that starts this pathway toward things like brains being developed, then isn't it true that the brain developing into the thing that it does is actually incidental?
Yes, that's correct. The specific traits that evolve are not predetermined. They emerge incidentally from random mutation.
Doesn't it follow that if something's incidental, like the brain, that it actually doesn't have an objective purpose to exist? It just incidentally exists to do things like thinking.
Yes, that's right. From a purely evolutionary perspective, the brain doesn't have some built-in objective purpose. It's just
Okay. So if the brain has no purpose from the evolutionary view to think, then it follows that there isn't really a proper way to think or an improper way to think.
And that's the heart of the situation. If macroevolution has caused us to evolve from single-celled organisms all the way up to, what we are today, and all the things that we have are just processes of these random mutations, then the brain even itself, there's not necessarily any purpose for it that you can really objectively cling to. Now, it sounds insane to come to that conclusion, but is it really? If you really think about it, if there is no way for you to objectively point to something and say, this is true, then how do you know that the body parts we have and the things that we have are not just, as he said, random mutations? Right? So even the whole aspect of thinking is random. Now, obviously, like the atheists will then jump in and say natural selection. Okay, well, even when we go down that road, it's not necessarily like a determining factor. Oh, well, because of natural selection, that just shows that one is stronger, the other is weaker. The stronger one outweighs the weaker. So in the case of the brain developing, yeah, you can say that because of hundreds of millions of years, the brain has conditioned itself to do X, Y, and Z. It's still not telling us, okay, well, so what? Like, that's not telling us anything. It's just telling us what it does, but it's not telling us why it does it and for what reason and why objectively you can know that what it thinks is true. And I think that's what the heart of Jim Bob is getting at here. He says a lot of churches stream the liturgy live. They can follow along with the readings and prayers alongside a spiritual father, virtually at least. Yeah, my parish does that as well. So find a good parish, man. I know, there's a lot of online Orthodox priests, so you can see what church that they preside over. I know there's Father Peter Hears, there's Father Moses, Josiah Trenum. Like, there's a lot of cool people online. And you can see if their liturgy is being streamed, and just tune into that. And sometimes like you'll even, I think Father Peter Hears or Josiah, I can't remember if it's Peter Hears or Josiah Trenton, but people email him and he reads like their questions live on air. So obviously, like, I'm not a priest, so I would take that question to him.
Yes, that's one interpretation. In that view, thinking is just a biological process, and there's no inherent correct or incorrect way.
Okay, so if there's no inherently incorrect or correct way, why would we trust people who think evolution is true if their own view says that their own thinking is improper or improper?
Yes, that's a fair challenge. People often justify trusting evolutionary theory because it's supported by lots of evidence and rigorous testing, even if the thinking process itself is a product of evolution.
No, if there's no proper way to think, then there's no proper way to evaluate testing and evidence.
Yes, exactly.
You see what happened? So it's not, because and this is the problem that we have, like, in the aspect of when it comes to running like transcendental arguments or arguments prior to argumentations, or knowledge prior to argumentation, is that it's so devastating that it cuts the whole argument that sometimes it's hard for people to follow. It's because most of the time people don't think about what they think about, right? So I mean, really, this cuts down at and he said it very clearly. He said, according to, it's the whole atheist ethos, right? If there's not something that's proper or improper, then when it comes to the brain and you're saying, well, thinking this way is proper and thinking that way is improper, okay, according to who? How do you know that this is correct? And then again, they'll go back to natural selection, they'll go back to evolution. They say, well, it just seemed better for the brain to evolve this way based on what it went through. Yeah, but that doesn't explain, it doesn't ground anything. It's just stating, that's just the state of affairs. Yeah, like this is what happened, but it's not explaining why this is objectively right or wrong to do this way. For all we know from the atheist ethos, we could all be thinking improperly right now. And like a really good example that I give sometimes too is like they'll say something to the effect of like logic, right? Oh, logic is I mean, most atheists, they say this without saying it, but they'll affirm to some degree that logic is subjective. Okay. Well, if logic ultimately becomes subjective, so essentially what they say is, well, we all just think this way. So because we all just think this way, then, we all can just hang our hat on the fact that we all think this way. Therefore, we know it's true. That's just state of affairs. It's just saying something that is, but it's not giving us why we ought to believe that that is the proper state of affairs. So what Jim Bob is doing here is he's really cutting at it, and he's saying, well, if something is, if you're saying something is improper, then you by necessity must believe that it's juxtaposed with something that's proper. And if you're saying that something is proper, then what is your epistemic basis? What is your criteria to objectively say that something is proper? And they don't have one. It's just their opinion. So then it comes down to the aspect of the brain. Okay, if thinking is neither proper or improper, then how do you know that you're thinking correctly? And again, it's the same thing that I say with logic. If you say, well, everybody knows 2 + 2 is 4. Well, yeah. And I mean, quote unquote, it's obvious. But if there is no proper or improper way, or if logic itself is subjective, if it's a construct that we've all created, then how do you know that you have the correct interpretation of 2 + 2 = 4? That's the question. Again, guys, if you want to join the stream, you can join via X. The link is above. And let's get back into this. Let's get back into this. And then we'll go over some Protestantism stuff after this.
That perspective, all evaluation would just be another byproduct of evolution.
If it's true that your brain has no purpose to think properly or improperly, or there's no real standard for thinking properly, then you evaluating evidence for evolution couldn't be trusted.
Yes, that's the implication. If all our reasoning is just a product of blind evolutionary processes, then we wouldn't have a firm foundation to trust any conclusion.
Including evolution.
Exactly.
And that's reasonable to you to teach that to millions of people in public high school?
I get where you're coming from. A lot of people do raise that concern, and there's a big philosophical debate about how we justify what we teach. In science education, though, evolution is taught because it's supported by overwhelming empirical evidence.
Dude, that's the thing in question. If it's supported by empirical evidence, but the evolutionary view removes the ability to properly evaluate empirical evidence, then you don't have empirical evidence, dummy. I thought you're supposed to.
Yeah. So, I mean, and it kind of just, then he kind of goes into the whole, that kind of gets into what we call the underdetermination of data, where essentially, yeah, you can, because he's going to go into the whole idea of, you know, the, well, what's it called? I don't know why I want to say the hypostatic union, the hypothesis method, or the method of hypothesis. I always forget. I always get the two mixed up. It's just because my theology brain always gets in the way. But I mean, essentially, like what he's doing is he's saying like, okay, well, you have two scientists, right? And they're both looking at the same data set, but they come to drastically different conclusions based on the data set. Okay, well, who's correct in that situation? It's also an appeal to an authority fallacy that he's going to get into as well. But that's the direction he's going in. So if you guys want to check out that video, you can do that. You can go over here on Jim Bob's channel, made by Jim Bob. It's called Clankers. AI Can't Defend Evolution. So I thought it was really interesting.